remember, it was only a year or so after the assassination attempt. So people prayed for his recovery through that time. They got used to praying for him. And they were happy when he recovered. They were happy that he was coming here, but they wanted to continue to pray for him, that nothing like this would happen to him here. And because he was willing to come to visit us, they felt an obligation to pray for him, be close to him, because now, he's reaching out to us, and we have a chance to see him in the flesh, and many people will have a chance to be close to him. We began to see this is a spiritual journey. It's just not like tourists that are traveling. He's coming to teach us, but he's coming to demonstrate in his own life, his own faith, and his love for people. And he showed that in many ways. Like, he was willing that morning to talk to all those young people. When we went out to the site for the Mass, one of the first group of people we introduced him to were people who had, my old language, various kinds of handicaps. Blind people, deaf people, people with crutches, people with all kinds of problems. And he went in among them to talk to them, meet, and they could see, he was at home with them. So there was many ways in which he kind of demonstrated, again, being at home, being comfortable with his people. They're part of his people. So they see a pope now as not somebody way, way off in Rome. Pope was somebody we saw, we were next to. So in that day, he visited 3 dioceses, in Winnipeg, St. Boniface, and the Ukrainian Catholic diocese. A long day. Late that afternoon, he left Winnipeg to come to Edmonton. So it was early evening. And we had arranged that rather than coming to the international airport, they would come to MacNeil. There was a wonderful air base out there, and there's a landing that was long enough for some of these satellite people to land. So he landed there, he was very happy. And one of the interesting things about coming there was a big lineup of media people on the side of the tarmac. And I said, Holy Father, would you like to meet some of the media people? He said, yes. Went over and shook hands with everybody who was lined up there. First one that ever had an opportunity to meet in the flesh, We walked a good distance to get to the end of the tarmac. And these people never expected him to come there. It wasn't on any agenda. And they realized that. And I remember when he reached out to one young woman to shake her hand, and she was so rattled, she had a microphone in her hand, and she put the microphone in his hand. But, people were so happy and amazed and awestruck, that he would do that. And by the way, he stayed at a convent, the Grey Nuns Center at the West End. So not in a hotel or not in a great palace, but in a convent. And it was large enough to accommodate most of the entourage. Before he went to bed, I said, you got homework to do, Your Holiness. Homework, he said. I said, yes. The Edmonton Journal put a contest on asking young people if they would enter a contest and answer this question. What would you say to the Pope if you had a chance to see him in 100 words? And I said, there's going to be 10 of them on the way out of the convent tomorrow morning, and they'll say hello to you. But I said, here's the Edmonton Journal, and here's what they said. I didn't say, now you've got to read this, but the second kid he saw, he said, You're from Chile? Yes. And your uncle is in prison? Yes. And the young fellow's parents were behind him, and they started to cry because it's obvious, that he had read his article. But he did that all along. And near the end, he whispered to me, he said, "Is that young lady the one who asked, why can't women be priests?" I said, yes. I didn't know what he'd do. He went over and he was so gracious with her, asked her name and what she was doing. Never mentioned that question at all, but spent more time with her than with anybody else. Put him on the helicopter and took him out to the Mayo again. And that's where we had the site for the Mass. The effect on people, it's hard to measure that, honestly. But I think for all those, I don't know how many people are out there, 100,000 and beyond, for them, the Pope can't be any longer just a distant person, And they see he cares. And the effect on a lot of people who weren't Catholic, a lot of my friends in the media who were there, they were very, very, very impressed. I'm not too sure it changed me, but I think it did. I guess, and I think it's the effect having a lot of people. For a lot of people, they still remember that experience as one of the most powerful experiences of their lives because they saw the Pope in flesh. They saw him pray. They saw him, as I said, with a lot of people. But of course, I was very close to him. And when he came that evening, we took him to the Grey Nun Center, and we took him to the chapel, and he wanted to say a few prayers before the Blessed Sacrament, and I knelt down with him. What amazed me was that in a split second, he just seemed to be in a completely other world. He had that ability to get in touch with God, in prayer immediately. Sometimes people have to take a few minutes to get adjusted to where he is and whatever. No, that was instant. I saw that in many cases. And I began to notice that he could do that with people. He seems to be able to focus so completely and deeply to each individual that in a way it's almost as if he's able to have the same attitude to individuals as he has with God. He's just totally present. And there was one of your questions there, maybe you're going to come to it. You mentioned the word person. And that was a word used very, very often by the Pope. He always talked about the person, and in the context of the individual rights of every person, the individual responsibility, the individual worth of every person. He didn't often use the word human being. He's a person, and so in so many ways, his whole life was kind of a prayer. He could be relaxed, and so we became good friends. I really began to see him. I suppose every bishop feels the same way, but he was certainly my mentor and someone that I would try to emulate. He's here a day and a half. I had meals with him 5 times. Most of those times it was just the Vice President, Archbishop Legary, and myself. So, for example, we had breakfast the morning before going out for the Mass. And in the middle of breakfast, I noticed we're eating cornflakes. And I said, "Holy Father, do you like cornflakes?" And he said, "Well, the sister put it here for us to eat, so we eat it." Simple enough. And it's wonderful. You know, it was early in the morning. He probably wasn't all that anxious to start getting the conversation. So I was trying to find any which way to get him conversing with us. He wasn't biting at all. And I said, you know, oftentimes I think in your writings and in your talks, you talk about that our faith should be enculturated, should be part of our people, who we are. But I said, who are we as Canadians? We've got so many cultures here. So in culture, what? In what culture? Oh, I looked up, he said, you're just creating your own culture here. You're just beginning. Europe has done that over centuries. You're just beginning here. So then he was alive for all kinds of discussion. He's blessed now, and I was just praying to him when I was waiting for you, and so before too long he's going to be canonized. And again, you know, as I say, he was among us, and he could make things so simple. I don't know if you ever read one of his encyclicals was at the beginning of the new millennium, and in the middle of it, he talked about holiness. He said, we're all called to holiness. So when a person comes for baptism, we could ask, do you want to be holy? Instead of, do you want to be baptized? And then he said, the description of holiness is the high standard of ordinary Christian living. Nobody has ever said that before or since. But that brings it down to the ordinary housewife. What's holiness? The high standard of ordinary Christian living. This sounds so easy. And he could probably say, you know, if you still thought you were listening, that means following God's will. Same thing. So for him, holiness was simply being ourselves, being who God wants us to be.